The biggest shakeup in LG's OLED lineup this year is that the C series has been split in twain. Opt for the bigger 77 and 83-inch sizes and you'll get what LG dubbed the C6H, with similar RGB tandem technology which used to be reserved for the higher-end G series. But stick with one of the smaller sizes of the C6 and you'll have the standard W OLED that we are all used to on the C series. Unless you bought the 48-inch size of the C6, but more on that later. We've already reviewed the new C6H over here if you want more details on how it performs. But today, we're going over the standard C6, which goes up to a 65-inch size. And if you don't want to miss our upcoming review of the G6, you know what to do. Let's cut to the chase. If you bought a C5 last year, you'll be happy to hear that the C6 is more of the same, which is not a bad thing, considering the C5 was one of the best and most popular TVs we've tested last year. But if you were waiting to upgrade, hoping for a bigger leap in performance, you might be a little underwhelmed with the standard C6, especially at the price LG is asking for it. Is the C6 worth it? Well, that depends on how much money you have to burn. It is a fantastic mid-range OLED, as every C-series OLED has been before it. But now is probably the best time to start looking for a deal on last year's C5 or even a higher-end G5, depending on your budget, while they're still on sale and available. You'll get almost the same performance as the C6, but at a lower price. The C6 does have a slightly updated panel with a higher max refresh rate of 165Hz, giving it a little bit of an edge for PC gaming. It also features a new Alpha 11 Gen 3 AI processor, but otherwise, a lot of the features here will be familiar. 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, VRR, Dolby Vision HDR, it even looks practically identical to last year's model. So, what kind of performance can you expect from the C6? As always, black levels are deep and inky with no blooming. Nothing new here, it's an OLED. Brightness in SDR is good, with high peak brightness making it a solid choice for bright room viewing, despite falling well below the bar set by mini LEDs. It's also significantly dimmer than the C6H. In any case, the ABL kills a lot of brightness in scenes where more of the screen is bright, like a hockey game. HDR brightness, meanwhile, is great. It's comparable to the C5 in real scenes, but it can hit higher peaks, reaching over 1400 nits in both a 2% and 10% window. We also measured 260 nits full field. If you want an even brighter picture in HDR, turning on dynamic tone mapping allows the TV to hit slightly higher peaks in real scenes, but you'll be sacrificing some accuracy in the process. Speaking of accuracy, the PQ EOTF tracking in filmmaker mode is very close to target across the board, so HDR content looks largely faithful to the way it was mastered. There's some slight roll-off near the TV's peak brightness to preserve gradation in bright parts of the scene, though it's a little more gradual for content mastered at 4000 nits. When it comes to color, the TV is accurate enough in SDR before calibration. Most people will be pleased with the colors out of the box. White balance and color temp are spot on, although more saturated colors are somewhat off the mark. With calibration though, you can get it close to perfect. In HDR, like we saw with the C6H, pre-calibration color accuracy is a bit worse. Reds are noticeably undersaturated, and there are a lot of luminance mapping errors. Color temp also runs a bit cool. After calibration, there's some improvement, especially with luminance mapping and white balance, but some colors, especially reds, are still noticeably off, and the color temperature is unchanged. The C6 has full coverage of the DCI-P3 color space, and decent coverage of the wider BT2020 color space. The same goes for HDR color volume. Dark saturated colors and shadow details are especially vibrant, though, as expected with a WOLED panel, some colors can appear a bit washed out because of its reliance on the white subpixel to boost bright highlights. One of the big issues we ran into with last year's LG OLEDs was excessive banding in HDR and diagonal dithering artifacts in very dark scenes. This is one of the few areas where we actually saw a big improvement over the C5. There's almost no discernible banding in any shade on the C6, so if you watch a lot of HDR content, this is a big plus. As we mentioned in our C6H review, the dithering issue is still present on the tandem models in Dolby Vision. Thankfully, it isn't nearly as bad on the C6, but banding is slightly worse in Dolby Vision content, and you might notice some loss of detail in scenes with very dark, near black areas. Despite that teensy issue, however, the C6 is still a fantastic option for watching movies or TV shows in HDR or otherwise, thanks to its brightness, contrast, colors, and processing, especially if you're watching in a dark room. Now, it's no slouch in brighter environments either. Reflection handling is solid. While it struggles a bit with direct reflections, indirect reflections are barely noticeable. Ambient light has little impact on black levels, and color isn't badly affected either. All of that, combined with its brightness, means you shouldn't be too concerned with visibility during the day or in a bright room. Of course, there are brighter TVs out there, and panels with matte coatings that cut glare even more, but if you're upgrading from an older TV, you will not be disappointed. Now, how is the C6 for gaming? The short answer, it's fantastic. There's a reason smaller sizes of the C-Series have been popular gaming monitors for several generations, and this year's C6 takes things up even further with a new 165Hz refresh rate, bumped up from 144Hz. It's a small but welcome upgrade for PC gaming, and motion looks very crisp thanks to the near instantaneous response times. Input lag is incredibly low when using the Game Optimizer picture mode, as expected from a TV of this caliber. If you don't want to use the Game Optimizer mode, we also measured very comparable input lag in Filmmaker mode with the Game Optimizer setting turned on and the input label set to PC. On top of that, there's almost no noticeable motion artifacts resulting from fast pixel transitions. There's no real color ghosting or edge artifacts, making the gaming experience that much cleaner. Another big win for the C6 is that there's no longer a significant dip in HDR brightness when you switch into Game Optimizer mode. We actually measured higher peak brightness in game mode than in Filmmaker mode, hitting 1469 nits in a 2% window and 1438 nits in a 10% window. Real scenes also measured brighter overall. So expect a really punchy, impactful HDR gaming experience on the C6. So what about motion handling? Like all OLEDs, the C6 does have noticeable stutter as a result of its fast response time. If you want to reduce stutter, the motion interpolation feature is very consistent on the C6. It's not the most aggressive smoothing feature at a de-judder setting of 3, but it does reduce stutter to some degree, thanks to the added frames on either side of the original frame. So how does it compare to other models in the market? Well, we already covered how the C6 differs from the C6H, but they come in different sizes, so they don't directly compete. If you're debating between a standard C6 versus sizing up to get the new panel, well, the decision gets a little trickier. You will get a brighter, more vibrant TV with the C6H, but it's also considerably more expensive. Our advice if you're set on one of these new models? Get the biggest one that you can actually afford, and you won't be thinking about the grass on the other side. Next up, how does the C6 stack up against the higher-end G6? Well, the G6 literally has more stacks thanks to that RGB tandem panel. And just like the C6H, it makes a huge difference in brightness and color. But we had a hell of a time testing the G6 this year. Dolby Vision bugs, multiple firmware updates within weeks of release, difficulty calibrating, and HDR brightness that wasn't quite as bright as we were expecting. Now, that's not to say that the G6 isn't a worthy upgrade over the C6. It's still an amazing TV, but LG's quickly becoming the Cyberpunk 2077 of TV manufacturers, with the way they keep releasing unfinished products on day one. But we'll have a full review of the G6 up soon, if you want to weigh the pros and cons for yourself. Lastly, there's been some chatter about the 48-inch size of the C6 having an RGB tandem panel, like the C6H. We wanted to get to the bottom of that, so we bought one. Initial testing shows a spectral power distribution that suggests it does actually have an RGB tandem panel. We'll be testing it as a monitor, so keep an eye out on our computer channel for a full review in the near future. If you want more details about any of our test results, we'll have a link to the full review in the description below. And if you have any questions, our staff and community are on Discord too. Come check us out!